Sorry, sir.
Yep, go ahead.
Um, I'm on bookshelf right now, and I don't see the management book. Were we supposed to receive a code from? I can't remember her name right now.
Yep, you
Yeah.
didn't get it. Okay, I'll make
No.
arrangements for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'll make sure that you actually do get that book.
Okay.
Fantastic. So we want to better understand the philosophy of how to implement and also how to strategically set up an environment. So we're going to look at organizational structures. We'll also take a look at some of the traits and qualities of an entrepreneur, because a lot of entrepreneurs do need managerial skills, which is unfortunately not always the case. Out of all the entrepreneurs I've met in my life, and I've met thousands of them, I've got news for you. Most of them haven't got a clue. They're good at what they do. They really are. They have an idea, they know what to do, but they just don't know how to manage. And that's one of the unfortunate elements, as we could actually draw upon, let's say, Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, brilliant before he passed away. But when he was running Apple in the beginning, he really didn't have the managerial skills necessary. And as you probably know a little bit of history, he was fired. He was literally removed from Apple. Even though he owned a big chunk of it, he was still removed from the board of directors. So again, it's a question of you need to have very specific skills, and this means that you need to learn them. We also want to take a look at the importance of ethics, social responsibility, governance. There are legal consequences for, and also social consequences when a company doesn't really represent the interests of a, let's say, a social mix of that particular nation. So we want to be very, very aware of some of the ethical issues that can come up. We have lots of explanations to do through there. We also want to take a look at contingency approaches. As we discovered with human resources, and as you'll discover in almost every business course, there is an absolute fundamental necessity to ensure that you are constantly planning ahead so that you know what could go wrong and what will you do in that case. So we want to take another look at that one again. We'll also take a look at how we motivate our employees, because that's a big issue. Uh, all of my experience tells me this is an area that you need to understand a little bit better. We also want to take a look at the steps in the control process and also elaborate on some of the common control systems used in the workplace. Fundamentally, we really want to know, what does a manager do and what are they fundamentally responsible for? And in today's society, it is very different than it used to be. So we're going to rip it apart and take a closer look at it. To do that, of course, there is a book. We will talk about that book in a few moments as soon as we get some other stuff here. So to figure out what the actual end result is going to be, one of the quizzes I may actually just remove totally. And the reason is because we lose a day. And the fundamental here is 20% for the 3 quizzes. So I will reproportion those. And also we'll take a look at the final exam, which is 50% of your final mark. Because it's only a 2-week course, it's not a lot. However, there is still quite a bit to memorize. And assignments, there are 2. And I'm going to shift them a little bit from where they are right now. And professionalism, 10%. You've got to make sure that your assignments are handed in on time. And I realize sometimes it's a little difficult. Life happens, but you still got to get them in on time. And let's just take a look here at our plan. So once that book is available, and I'm going to throw some things into the chat anyhow so that you have them available. So day number 1, chapter 1, and of course it goes like that until Thursday, where we jump into 2 chapters. And then of course, day number 5, back to 1 chapter again, but there's a quiz. These quizzes are actually based on multiple chapters. So keep in mind that on Wednesday, there is a quiz. This is for the first two chapters, which are a little bit bigger. And then, of course, we jump into 4 chapters or 3 chapters for the second quiz. Then the second week is when we actually get into finishing it off with chapter number 11 and 16, and 14. But we also do 2 assignments. Now, assignment number 1 is a toughie to do without chapter 11, but I'm going to provide it on Friday, the week before, because we do lose that 10th day. So I'm going to give you assignment number 1 on the Friday, and then assignment number 2 I'll give you on Tuesday. So at least you'll have them a little bit in advance. You will not be responsible for turning them in until Friday. So this means on Friday, I expect it, you have to have them in so that they can be marked at the same time. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And I've already sent this to you in the invitation, so you have this available to you as well.
Sir, the third quiz, what day would the third quiz be done on the second week?
It should have been on Monday, but it might be Tuesday as well.
Okay.
Okay. Again, I have to switch that last week a little bit simply because of what is transpiring. But that the third quiz, I should say, should be on chapter number 8. And possibly if it's on 11 as well, and I have to double check what they've done. But if it is on 11 as well, then it'll be Tuesday.
Okay.
Piece of cake. So give me one little second here. Okay, fantastic. Whoops. Okay, so I just sent an email to make sure that your book is sent out to you. Okay, so I'm just going to throw a couple of things into the chat so that you actually have some documents as well. So let me just throw these in here. Fantastic. There we go.
Sorry.
Yep.
So when you go to the Brightspace website,
Yep.
if you go under introduction to management and go to textbook, the textbook's there. It's just it goes downwards. You have to skip a page, and after you skip it, it brings up the textbook.
Fantastic.
Okay. So I don't need the link for bookshelf then. Okay. Thank you.
Fantastic.
No
Yes.
worries.
1 mark. 1 bonus point. Fantastic. Okay, so let's take a look at this particular setup. I'm just going to open this up. Fantastic. So you should still see my screen up on your screen there. There you go. So one of the things we really want to understand about business, and I just gave you an example that most entrepreneurs really, they're very good at what they do. And we've stressed this before, that when it comes to business, it's really good at what it does, but not always is it capable of managing itself as well as it should. Either it doesn't have the creativity or it is a one-shot, let's say, wonder, where they have one idea and they don't know what to do beyond that point. But in most cases, it's really a question of learning how to manage, and more specifically, manage people and manage money. These are the key elements. Managing resources is extremely important, but unfortunately, a lot of people really don't have the skill set necessary. It's not the same thing as simply put them into an environment where there are people and there are resources. I've actually been employed a couple of times as a consultant to go in and actually fire people who were placed into management positions simply because they thought they were a good match, but they didn't have the skill. And unfortunately, that happens from time to time. You have the abilities, but you don't have the skill to apply it. So when it comes to management, we're just going to open this up here eventually. There we go. We want to know what are the challenges today. And I think you basically know that nowadays, with so much competition on an international level, where your competitor can be anywhere in the world, and not just one, but maybe thousands or even tens of thousands of competitors in virtually every space. So you need to have very specific skills nowadays, and you have to have the gusto and the desire to actually make something happen. So the challenges we want to take a look at in the new economy, and everything we're talking about is in transition right now because of COVID-19 and what is happening internationally on an economic scale. What are the organizations like in the new workplace? They are totally changing. You want to survive, you've got to get out there immediately and start pushing, because this is fundamentally what is happening. So many companies have been quiet for such a long time now, several months, some of them 4, 5, 6 months. Well, some of them won't even continue. Just to give you a quick example, I was driving up near a plaza. It's kind of looking at a store that I was wondering if they survived or not. And I noticed that this very large store had closed up, and they have bars across the windows and everything, so people can't get in and steal stuff. But it's really fascinating that they were a very successful company, but the ability to live out the long term as became necessary with this COVID-19, they didn't have that capability. Again, somebody whose hobby was to do something and started a little store didn't have the managerial skills necessary to live it out. The situation of not being able to do business, and of course, probably with the landlord as well, whoever owned the building, probably decided that they wanted to be paid, and of course, they couldn't pay. So we really need to take a good look at what's happening in this new environment. Also, what is the makeup of the external environment of an organization, and also some of the characteristics internally. And we are going to look at how is an organization linked to its environment, because there is an empathetic and also kind of simplistic connection with your environment. When you disconnect from it, of course, your business will not do well. So we need to take a look at what is happening in that kind of environment. And who are managers in the first place? What are the skill sets that are necessary? What are the functions that must be done on a daily, monthly, yearly, and even bi-yearly, multi-year basis? And what is a management process? So there is an actual process. And how do we learn the essential management skills and competencies that a really good manager learns? There is a book out there, which if you ever get a chance to go to the library, if it's open again, there is a book called The 1 Minute Manager. It's an older book. It's about 70 pages long. It's more like a child's book. It's not condensed writing. It's kind of open, lots of space in it. But it's an extremely good book written by someone who has a general insight into management. and what is really necessary. We'll explore some of those ideas anyhow, but it is a book that is worth looking at. So let's take a look at the overview of the workplace. Nothing stays the same. Nothing is impermeable. Everything changes. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, someone is going to invent or reinvent or redesign or come out with a new idea entirely. When you take a look at, excuse me, some of the minor things that can take place, and they can have detrimental changes take place as a result. For instance, gasoline. Before gasoline was electric and hydrogen. Then they came back to hydrogen. Then they came back to electric. So now we're looking at electric cars and electric housing where you have your own electricity and you don't have to worry about the grid. There's a lot of things that are kind of dynamically changing constantly. And businesses have to be aware of these because taxes change, environments change, people's skill sets change dramatically, by the way. One area can have the employees that you're looking for. We talked about this in the last course. And then, of course, you find out a week or a month later that because of programs, maybe even government programs, people start learning other disciplines and are not learning what you need. So you could actually find yourself with an absence of the kind of environment you needed in order to be successful. So we need to find why this particular dynamic presence of, let's say, the environment takes place in the way it does. So it's constantly changing, and therefore new career changes take place all the time, not only for management, but also for their subordinates. Smart people commit their energies and also intelligence and intellect to continuous learning. The one thing a manager cannot do, and this goes for anyone who wants to gravitate into those positions, you can't stop learning. The bad part of this is schools are still turning out people who are far more educated than, let's say, the managers in place right now. They may have product knowledge, but they don't have the new knowledge. And the new knowledge is based on what is happening in the competitive environment and, of course, some of the new tools available. So you often see companies that have been around 40, 50 years being displaced by a company that comes out of nowhere. And literally overnight, they can replace an older company simply because they have new ways of doing things. They're cheaper to do. They can cut their costs, and they can be a lot more lean when it comes to how many people and what kind of resources they have. So you can't stop learning. You're constantly trying to upgrade yourself. So this is something for those of you who want to gravitate towards managerial positions. You really do have to keep yourself abreast of what's happening in your particular industry. If a company really wants to succeed and it wants to survive over a long period of time, the one thing that is an axiom or a general rule in a sense is that they must encourage the employees within their company to grow with them. As I've said before, nothing is stagnant. Everything is dynamically moving in one particular direction. And if you're not moving along with that particular wave of motion, then you're lost. Your company will not survive. I know I keep saying this, but my experience within, let's say, the boards of trade especially, is probably where I get my most of my knowledge about other companies. I've literally met thousands of company owners, and I've had a chance to talk to their staffs. So the one thing I have definitely learned is when they forget that they're in a dynamic process with competitors, and those competitors are not always waiting for them, they literally are going to go broke. You must stay on top of the game. You have to be ready for whatever is coming out. And that means that you have to be committed to the people within your company, to their education, to their skills, environment, to ensuring that they have the right tools to use, because your competitors will. Companies with a future offer inspirational leadership. Again, a manager cannot just be somebody who sits down and crunches numbers. They also have to be a people person nowadays. They have to communicate. And this has not always been the case in the past. So within the last 20 years, there's been some serious changes to how managers exist. In fact, some of the biggest changes was the elimination of most of the middle management jobs. This happened right across the border worldwide, where a lot of middle managers were removed. It was considered to be just too many levels within the environment, and therefore quite a few were destroyed, those particular jobs. So you spend a lot, you inspirationally help your employees, you coach your employees, you make sure that the resources and the environment is conducive to growth and also moving in the goal position that your company has chosen to attain. You're always moving in one particular direction. High performance companies gain extraordinary results from people. It is, as I mentioned in the last course, you can lose all your equipment, you can lose your building, in fact. It doesn't matter as long as you have the people that let's say you've trained, you've educated, they're aware of your culture, in other words, your procedures, policies, methodologies. If you have that element, those people, you can survive anything. Look at what's happened right now. Trios has been functioning throughout, whereas most educational institutions shut down. And again, the rationality is, yes, you can't use the buildings because of government restrictions, but at least you can continue to learn and you continue to move forward because the infrastructure is actually there. That's the key element, is having that infrastructure that can be flexible enough to give you an advantage, whereas the competition doesn't have it. So implementing strategies within the new workplace is really a question of maintaining and also building upon the foundation that you have within your organization. And that means making sure that the dynamic qualities such as employees are literally fed by giving them new knowledge, helping them to grow so that they help the company to expand and move along the goals path that they've chosen. So here's a good question for you, and I'd like each one of you to chime in and kind of answer this one. What are the challenges of working in the new economy? What do you think the challenges actually are nowadays? You can jump in at any point. Go ahead.
Working with diversity.
Diversity, definitely. What else? What else?
Rapidly changing technology.
Absolutely. So let me help you expand a little bit. One of the other things you have to think about is what's really happening out there. Are people spending money the way they used to? No. Does this mean that everybody is working who probably wants to work? No. Does it mean that people are doing their chosen jobs that they wanted to do and were continuing to do before COVID jumped in? The answer is no. Before that, even partially. So we really have to look at it from a dynamic space of the entire planet because it affects Ontario, it affects Canada. And when we look at it, what is the economy? Well, the economy is how much financial resources are moving and how many products are being created and services being provided. When we look at all of these elements and we look how the workforce is actually being utilized, then we can honestly say there are some serious challenges. Number one, we have to get people back working again. Number two, they have to start spending again. Number three, everybody needs to be coagulating with one another. In other words, we can't just simply close the borders. Well, that's what the US has done. They've shut their borders a little bit. So there's a lot of products that Canada makes that isn't going anywhere. So, in other words, a lot of people are not being hired. For the highly savvy and highly intellectual managers, this is an opportunity. For others, it's devastation. So when we look at what are the challenges are the people within management, are the people running the companies, are they creative enough to come up with solutions? You know, it's one thing for a manager to pay themselves millions of dollars a year, which usually happens when everything is going down the tubes because they want to jump out as quickly as possible. But you need to have the right people who can stimulate the economy by finding new ways of exploring things. So the US has closed its borders. Right now in England, they have a similar problem. They're not even sure what to do because of the euro. Remember, they want to jump out of the euro, so the only way they can get into it is through Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland has a special position within the European Union, which allows it to trade. Whereas now England, because it's not part of the international union or the European Union, they cannot trade openly. So there's all kinds of financial restrictions on them. So this is what Canada is running into. One of our largest trading partners in the world is the United States, and they're closing their border to Canada. In other words, only certain things can come through. And eventually, with Trump, if he gets in again, you're going to see even more border disputes between our two countries because he definitely wants America first, which we would like Canada first. So you have this catch-22 scenario. But think of these things outside the box a little bit. There are real impacts. Since a lot of things are coming from China to begin with, there are now big restrictions on China's products coming into anywhere in North America. And not only that, but many of the companies that we used to deal with, almost needed to deal with, have ceased to exist. So there are some serious challenges here. We are now reinventing the wheel in a sense. We never made masks before. Now we're making masks, and 3M is now producing masks for Canada as well. So you've seen some major changes taking place. Now it's becoming a real opportunity. This is a super opportunity for any company that jumps into this arena, but it's also a challenge because now it is an isolated environment in a sense. So it's hard to find talent sometimes. This was the other thing, you know, where do you find talent? Was people are losing their jobs, they're also losing confidence in themselves. And now it's hard to figure out if I have to jumpstart everything again, where do I find the people? So talent becomes a necessity, and we need to encourage talent. And also diversity, as Keston actually pointed out, it's a challenge nowadays to make sure that you don't overlook anyone and you don't overlook anything, because sometimes you're surprised at just how incredibly talented individuals are, and they may have challenges, but that means the companies have to find ways of helping them. And also globalization. You know, it used to be when I was a kid, the closest company you came to international was the companies like Kresge's, Woolco, Consumers Distributors. There was no Walmart. There were no giant corporations. Everything was localized. But nowadays, your closest competitor is not local. Your competitor is anywhere in the world, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you need to only just simply order online, and within a day, It's at your doorstep. So competition has become really fierce. And as Keston also pointed out, technology is changing. I was just looking at a video before you guys connected, which was a couple of companies who are now printing cars. In other words, it's a very slow process at this point, but they're proving that 3D printing technology can be scaled so that you can even print a car. And we do know that China and some of the American companies have actually been printing houses. So by using concrete and a special mix, high-speed drying, they're able to actually print a house using concrete. So this is really something that is changing dramatically. Maybe you can go out to a location and in 24 hours you can print an entire house. And all you need to do now is go in with electricians. Well, I'm pretty sure that somebody with two brain cells functioning at the same time will figure out that you can probably build harnesses and therefore put wires in harnesses and just tape them on the wall before you even put up the drywall. So at some point, somebody is going to come up with new ideas, new thoughts that will blow away their competition. And all those companies that did not invest in their own people, did not invest in their processes or their technologies or their management, they're going to be lost. So these are things that change astronomically. I'll give you another example for technology. One of the first things I really wanted as a teenager, okay, was just when automated machinery was coming into vogue, in other words, in a big way. And the one thing I really, really wanted was a router. And because a lot of the work we used to do was three-dimensional. So we used routers in pantographs, which are bigger machines. And they're very, very specific to what they do. And we really wanted a computerized one. And computers at that point were super expensive. We're talking millions of dollars. And you couldn't really get cheap ones. I think the cheapest one I ever worked on was a couple of grand. And I had to build it myself. And it was through a company called Heathkit, which doesn't exist anymore in Canada, but still exists in the States. And this was, excuse me, you built a computer from diodes, capacitors, and resistors. There were no chips. And this was a nightmare. I've got news for you. And actually, I almost electrocuted myself at one point. So technology has really changed. Nowadays, any idiot can actually sit down, watch a couple of YouTube channels, and they can build the machine I desperately wanted to have. So these are things that can be nowadays, virtually anyone can do these things. Ethics, however, has also become a big challenge too, because it is easy to do things that are not ethical, cutting corners, making inferior products. We discovered that from China just recently with face masks that didn't live up to the expectations. And there was no concern. They didn't care one way or the other, whether you liked it or not. So ethics are one of these things you really have to take into consideration as well. And we'll take a look at that more in depth as we go along. Careers. When it comes to working as a manager nowadays, it's a career decision. You don't jump back into something else. You keep moving in that direction. And that means that you're constantly evolving. You're learning more about your particular field and about the field of management per se. And that includes psychology, a little bit of physiology, little things that you need to understand about being able to work with people. So when it comes to talent, we really recognize that the most important element within a company, it's not the machines. It really isn't. And it really has nothing to do with the building itself. It has to do with the people that we encourage to grow with the company. So we call it intellectual capital, the brain power behind the company in a sense. we recognize that it's the people that give us the advantage. Sometimes a person can come up with a whole new way of doing something, and it totally changes everything. It changes the way you do business. It changes your profits line. It changes everything within your organization. It may even reposition you entirely. So intellectual capital of an organization is probably the most important, the most critical element within a company. And it's really up to the management to encourage it. But here's the bad news. Most companies just don't understand that. It depends on the perspective of the manager. If the manager understands the necessity of having a well-designed, well-implemented staff, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they can't see it because it's not part of their training. They never learned the importance of good, well thought out plans. Diversity, well, once again, reflects the differences in the respect to having a variety of different variations: gender, age, race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, able-bodiedness, doesn't matter. You have people who are so diverse that they bring all kinds of treasures to you. And that means their way of doing things, it means their creative approach to things. It can really make a big difference. So we encourage it. We want to make sure that it is allowed to grow, because that will give the company a greater advantage in the long run. Diversity, again, there are biases, prejudice, discrimination. The glass ceiling usually affects only women. However, it can affect others as well. What a glass ceiling is, and I'm just defining it, I think I defined it in human resources as well, is senior managers refuse to allow you to gravitate to their position. In other words, you may be female and it's an all boys club, and they don't think that a woman could actually do that job. You'd be surprised at how many women I've met who are absolute brilliant and who are running corporations and are really good at it. So this philosophy is an old-fashioned philosophy, but like anything, it takes time for some of these old-fashioned ideas to die out. So it still exists in some very large corporations. However, you probably have noticed that the more progressive, the more advanced, the more profitable they are, they always have women in key positions at the top of the company. So prejudice, discrimination, and the glass ceiling, there's still diversity's major bias. Globalization, there are no boundaries. Sorry, they don't exist. And you can order anything you want anywhere in the world. You can do business with anyone in the world. In fact, there are people out there who will do it for almost nothing. I'll give you an example. I think I gave it to you before in marketing, but I had a customer, and I used to actually have a point of presence on the internet, where one of my businesses actually created web pages and we used to display them for people. This one individual was desperately trying to upgrade her website, and I gave her a price. She only needed 1 or 2 pages. I can't remember what it was now, but they were e-commerce. So I gave her a price of about 10 grand, so $10,000 for 1 to 2 pages. And she was preparing to do it, but I thought to myself, you know, it's not fair. I know this person and I'd like to help them a little bit. So I told her to go to another website where she could put out a request to see if somebody else would make it cheaper. Just tell them what you want specifically, but don't tell them what the website is, and then they will bid on it. She got the page done for $50 from somebody in somewhere near the Philippines or wherever it was, or India, one of the two. And they did it for $50, and it was perfect. So you're competing against people all over the world nowadays. It's no longer something really simple. Uh, some of the logos I've used on businesses in the past, I've often done it through Fiverr, which used to be $5 and somebody would design something for you. So you didn't even have to think. You just told them what the purpose of the business was and what you were trying to accomplish. And they would give you several designs for $5. I thought it was brilliant because if you hired a company here, it cost you at least $2,000 to $3,000 for branding. So this was really nice. So you're in competition nowadays. It's no longer just you. So the impact on business, independence on resource flow. Maybe you can't even get the resources you want. Right now, with China being locked up a little bit, it's hard to get the resources you need. And you're not guaranteed that they're going to even come through customs. So what if you need raw materials coming from another country and they decide they're not sharing them? So resource flow becomes a big challenge too. And international business competition, well, we just talked about that. It's everywhere right now. But this is also a brilliant time. I can't even stress that to you. This is like the depression period where any kind of new idea literally catches on like wildfire. It's just a question of, do you have the creative inclination to promote your company? And that's the key element. Technology, well, big issues here. Technology, as Keston pointed out, is changing literally hour by hour by hour. As you probably know, with Elon Musk and the Tesla Corporation, he's actually coming close to his battery day, which everybody in the world seems to be very interested in. Battery day could change everything. He's actually working on something that will give him an order of magnitude for discharge and also for compression of electrons. So this could actually create a whole new battery technology, which means his cars would become uncompetable. They would be able to go thousands of miles on a single charge, where right now they're still the best. You can still go 300 kilometers, 350 kilometers, but that's on a single charge. You have to wait 40 minutes to recharge again. But his new technology could charge in minutes. And that would make a whole new change to everything. This would mean you wouldn't need to hook up your electrical to the grid. You could actually have it inside your own house. This means that buildings and also factories could now run totally off of the grid. This would save astronomical amounts of money. It also means aviation would actually be able to fly much longer. Most of the aircraft that are electric right now run for 15, 20 minutes maximum. So this would allow them to run for hours. You're going to see some big changes. Computers have changed. Most of the companies out there playing with computers, they've changed them. They're actually much faster than they ever were before, and they're much smaller. And again, you've noticed this with cell phones. Cell phones are taking over from computers. So it's really a question of this technology is getting more and more advanced where we can do things that couldn't be done before. The 3D printing, for instance, 3D printing clothing, 3D printing of food. We're really getting down there now that these things are becoming possible. For healthcare, they can print the organs that they want to explore a little bit more closely. They don't have to open you up anymore. So there's some real challenges that if you want to succeed out there, you have to learn how to use these things. So the internet, information technology, telecommuting has become far more viable at this particular point, and we're going to see more of it as we go along. So that means you need skill when it comes to the use of technology. The moral dilemma of most companies is, how do we function? because there are many, many different cultural characteristics from different people working in our environment. We really do need to understand how it all fits together and what is construed as being acceptable conduct for a business and also for the staff within that business. So this is where the principles come into it, and you have to have a policy-driven system. But it also means staying on top of it. So the code of moral policies and principles, that are standards of conduct in what is good and what is right. What is the best way of doing something? And do you simply decide, no, I'm going to do whatever I please? Or do you do what the company needs you to do, the country needs you to do? So you really do have to look at it that way as well. Ethical expectations of the modern businesses. Let's face it, employee does something really nasty, then the company suffers in a big way because society looks at them in a very different light. So integrity and ethical leadership is really important. We've discovered that many companies who embezzle or who actually cheat their customers, it isn't long before everybody becomes aware of it, and then they have a hard time staying in business, which hurts everybody. It hurts all the people in the business, all the staff members, and it hurts everybody who's a customer, and even the suppliers and local society who have nothing to do with you because of your taxes. The sustainable development, also natural environment protection. You're not just simply dumping. I've seen that happen. I've even tried to stop the guy. It's a lost cause. Consumer protection, and also human rights. There are a lot of companies who don't care. As you probably noticed right now, there's a big hoo-ha with Walt Disney, the Disney Corporation, because of that new movie that they created in China and Tibet. There's an awful lot of arguments taking place back and forth. I think Disney has removed it from the theaters and is only going to show it on their channel. So you're going to see some big changes take place in the way people view something. And this will hurt Disney as well. It'll hurt their financial bottom line. So when it comes to careers, there are different ways of looking at it nowadays as well. I know that there's been many times in the past where money's been a little short for some companies that I've owned, and it is for many companies. So sometimes you don't have as many core workers as you would like. And these are the full-timers who you hired for an indefinite period of time. Sometimes you have no choice. You've got to go to contractors, and sometimes just part-time because you just don't have the resources to incorporate everybody as a full-time employee. So these have become different approaches to careers, because here's the bad news. The core employees will become very, very sustainable, and you can also train them. But the part-timers, it may not be their primary job, and therefore you may have difficulty with the training. And contract workers, well, they have their own requirements because, number one, they're separate from you. And number two, they're not under your control. So you can't actually demand that they learn. It's up to them to actually learn, or you remove them and you get somebody who is. But it's a challenge. And these are some of the challenges that within careers you're going to run into. People must be prepared to be any one of these type of workers. You know, the key element here is some companies are going to have a real challenge, but I'm going to give you a story which will kind of help you a little bit. Years and years ago, in fact, I'll tell you two stories. The first story I'm going to tell you is a company that I owned, and it was when I was quite young, teenager, and I did not understand accounting. For me, accounting was some kind of alien language. I have visions of Cholet with little antennas coming out of her head. It was really weird stuff, and I could not grasp it. I really didn't understand it. But the one thing I did was I hired a contractor. It was a woman. She was, all she did was bookkeeping. That's all she did. But she would come in, and once a week, she would spend a half an hour with me. She had a laptop and she had a little tiny printer connected to it. And just to give you a little context, I used to drive a shitty old pickup truck because it's all I could afford. And she used to drive a Mercedes Benz. So give you an idea, I used to think that maybe I was doing the wrong thing. I should become a bookkeeper. What she was doing was contract work. She was hitting on all the little businesses and she would do their bookkeeping. And that means all she had to do was come in maybe once a month even for some of them. And she would charge by transaction. So every transaction she did, you would pay her for that transaction. She used to do my payroll. She did all the inventory and everything else for me. And it only took her about a half an hour once a week. So for me, this was brilliant because I think I used to, I'm guessing, because I don't remember the exact figures, but it would have been under $100. And she did everything. She printed the check. She did everything for me. I really admired her. But what I'm trying to tell you here is that because she had a whole bunch of customers and she was just doing bookkeeping, she was making many times more money than I was. She was making an awful lot. To buy a Mercedes even then was still quite a challenge. And she really was well dressed. She really seemed to enjoy herself. The second story I'm going to give you is also about contract work as well. And I'm just trying to remember what I wanted to say about it. I'll let it go. I'll come back to it. But just keep in mind, when it comes to contract work, it really is to your advantage sometimes because you can write off a lot of things as well. So the reality, oh yeah, I know what I was going to talk about. So contract work, the second example I was going to give you is I did some training long ago. I had a couple of companies and somebody asked me if I would work teaching entrepreneurs as well. It was just a part-time thing. They weren't paying very much. I think it was $200 an hour or something. This is a very long time ago. And I agreed to do it, and it was working for Keiko. And they were working for the government, and it was teaching people about entrepreneurship. And one of the young women was, and I think I've even told this story to you guys before, I'll say it again. She was from a religious group, a Muslim religious group that once she's actually married, she doesn't get to leave the house. It's kind of unfortunate. She's not allowed to go out by herself. She has to go with her husband. Husband was a truck driver, and I met him a couple of times. We taught her, there was a few of us got together. We taught her how to be a virtual assistant because her dream was to have her own career. She really, really wanted to be a secretary or something like that. So we taught her how to be, somebody who sits beside a computer and that individual can actually take orders and then do typing and then send the typing to whoever it is by fax or by computer file or something of that nature. And this is quite kind of an interesting period of time because there really wasn't that much of it. And she actually did so well that I met her a few years later, her and her husband and her kids. What her husband had done was taken the barn because they were living on a rural property. And he took the barn and he converted it into an office for her. So the bottom floor of the barn would be an office. And she ended up with 12 different women who were working in the area or living in the area. And they would come over and they would do the typing and people would dictate on a file. They would send the file. And then, of course, the girls would type it up and they'd type it on a computer. And then she would send that file to the company, and they could then print it. So she was doing this kind of part-time contract type of thing, and she was doing extremely well. It's just sometimes it's just creativity, and you can find all kinds of ways of doing something, but you still need that managerial capability. You need to be able to manage your time and your money and your resources. So here we come with another question. What are organizations like in the new workplace? They are diametrically different than they used to be. So it's a collection of people, but let's hope that this is a collection of people who have been chosen specifically to fulfill the goals of the company and to emerge within that particular environment as a leader in that particular category of business, whatever it happens to be. Transforming any kind of resource, whatever it happens to be, whether it's someone like the example I just gave you, or somebody phones you and you type out what the person is saying, you dictate, or maybe they send you a file and it's got their voice in it and you just simply type it up and you make any corrections necessary, and then you send it back to them in a file and they pay you for that. So it's really a question of, you know how to take the input, whatever the input is, whatever category it runs under, and you're able to do some process to it within your organization that the output is what people are looking for. So it could be a finished product, it could be a product in making. To give you an example of that issue, a friend of mine, he was going bankrupt, and I agreed to go out and help him, which is probably one of the worst things I ever decided to do. I actually went out to help him. He was basically almost bankrupt, and he had a 60,000 square foot building. I think I even told you this story before. He had some very heavy duty computerized equipment and didn't know how to use it well. And with me, I'm an extremely creative individual, and we got him back on his feet again. How he actually survived was he was able to create a connection with a company in Tennessee. This is the US, and they needed bar stools. And his ability with his computerized equipment was to be able to cut out and then hollow out these particular things, and then drill them so that you can put them together perfectly every time. And he got an order for several $100,000. So this actually got him back on his feet again. Again, it's a question of, he had the infrastructure to do part of the job. He didn't have the infrastructure for the legs of the stools, but he had the seat. He could actually make those with his eyes closed. So this is something that the company knows how to do the middle work, and it knows how to create the output necessary, whether it's the end of the line or it's just a step within the line. You have that capability. And this is what organizations fundamentally, they need to be able to do these functions. I've given you examples before in marketing where sometimes a customer would contact my company and they would say, can you do this? And I would, in the back of my mind, I'd say, not a chance in hell. I can't make any money doing it. I can't do it. We don't have the equipment. But I would tell the customer, yeah, we'll do it for you. I'll get you a price by the end of today. And I would start calling every competitor I had, everybody I could find. And I'd reintroduce myself, let them know who I am, and we are competing. But I needed something done, and they had the skill, and they would give me a percentage of the profit just for the sale. Again, remember, they may be looking for something to do as well. So I acted as a middleman. So this is, again, the process. You have a skill, you have your ability to process something, and it's just an outcome that you're looking to do. So you have the center. You're the one who is doing the final work on something. Again, a good manager looks for opportunities. So organizational performance. you create any kind of value when you do something that adds to something. If I take a board and I cut letters out of it and sell those letters, you'd be surprised. I've done that in the past. I had a neighbor in another building, and he asked me one day, could you make a specific kind of rounded uh, letters for a big one of these giant signs you see out on the roadways? And I said, yeah, we could do that, piece of cake. And I was selling letters to him out of scrap. We had lots of scrap, and we used the scrap to do it. So it was kind of like taking garbage and making it into something. We added value to it for the other person. And then, of course, he would actually gild them and put gold on it. And most of my employees used to stand out back when they knew he was gilding, because he always did it outside. He never did it inside because of the fumes from there's like a yellow paint they use underneath gold. And then they put the gold leaf, the 24 karat gold on it. And my employees, because he would brush it and little flakes would come off, all my employees would stand at the back trying to grab these little flakes. It was quite funny. So if you add value to something, definitely it's worth something. And this is what the performance really is. When valuing creation occurs, so when you're actually creating something, you're going to profit from it. Whether it happens to be that you buy cupcakes and you put little faces on top, or you make something for somebody, or something like that. I'll give you another example of another person who did just this. They actually was able to work with a small store. Nonprofit organizations add wealth to society as well because they're taking in money. I had a distributor long ago, and she was quite a smart character, really smart. Her husband, not so much so, but she was smart. And her claim to fame was that she was young. She had become pregnant with her second child. If I remember correctly, it was second, it wasn't the third one. And they lived in a little house on Bronte Road. And you got to remember that some of the older houses, they weren't built the way you guys live today. So she lived in a house that had a carpet on the floor. When I was a kid, I had a friend who lived in the country. And when I used to go to his place, then they also had the same scenario. It's a dirt floor, but they have a carpet on top, so it looks like they have a floor. It's just because they didn't have a lot of money, and neither did she. And her husband was working for a company that eventually was bought by Petrocan. What's really fascinating about her is that because she was pregnant, she couldn't really go very far. And she had a young child as well who was also in the house. So what she used to do was get hemp, and she would make these hanging plant baskets. And she went in one day to Oakville, which is just down the road from Bronte, and she asked the woman if she could give her a deal on it because she didn't have very much money. And the woman said, well, I've got all this garbage here, this hemp, and no one buys it. And you're the only one who buys it. So I'll make you a deal. If you'll teach people how to make things out of it so I can get rid of it, then I'll let you have it. And she did. And she charged $35, if I remember correctly. And she would teach them how, she would give them the material, and she made sandwiches so that they would have a lunch, and made Kool-Aid or something or other. So it's interesting how that built up, because just to kind of fast forward a few years from then, she was a millionaire. To give you an idea, owned her own hobby stores, owned quite a few of them, and even owned the land that they were sitting on. And when they sold the land, they sold it for $32 million. So this will give you an idea that sometimes you start off with just a hobby or an idea, and it can grow, but you need that management. And as I said, her husband, not too smart, but she was smart, very, very managerial in a sense. So productivity, an overall measure of the quality and the quantity of the output, really is a question of making sure that your product is living up to the expectations of not only your customers, but it's something that is economically manageable. You can make money from it. There's always a break-even point, and the more of something you do, the cheaper it gets in the long run. So it's just a question of finding where that actual equilibrium is and then exceeding it. An output measure, so performance effectiveness is really a question of what kind of output you're able to achieve based on whatever goals you've set for yourself. And performance efficiency, a measure of the inputs of the resources, the cost associated with the goal's accomplishment. Let's just say that you intended to make cakes. To make a cake probably would cost you $20, $22, maybe even more. Nowadays, maybe much more, depending on what you wanted to put on it, you know, what kind of frosting and everything. However, if you took the same materials, you probably could make 4 or 5 cakes. So this means that the cost for the one cake might be very prohibitive. But if you maximize your ability to make cakes, you may find that the materials, you have lots of extra material, and you can therefore make many cakes. And that brings your cost down. So it's really a question of effectiveness, the utilization of your resources, and also the efficiency, how well you use those particular resources. And that can give you amazing capability. I'll give you a quick story to kind of personify this a little bit. There was a couple in the United States. I don't remember the entire story, but this couple, the husband was a lawyer and the wife just kind of stayed home. And her domestic decided to go back to South America. So as a result, she wouldn't have anybody to clean the house and do, you know, the things that are done by a domestic in the house. So her husband said, well, you know, we can look around. And then they found out that one of their neighbors had lost their domestic because that domestic decided to leave as well. And then, of course, a couple of her friends were having difficulties finding a domestic. So they decided to start their own little business. And what they did was they put ads in the paper and they had people come out and they used a stopwatch. They set one room up that was kind of dirty and they would ask the people to go into the room and they would time them to see how long it would take them to clean. If they cleaned within a certain period of time, they hired them as a contractor. They were smart. They realized that quite a few of her friends needed one. They needed one. So this is what they actually did, it was quite interesting. Now, the company is international, and I cannot remember which one it is, but it was started that way. That's how they actually started. So again, it's one of those things where they look for effectiveness and efficiency. So we can see here by this little matrix, the goals attained, and also the resources that you've utilized. How effectively and how efficiently. A supervisor or a manager really does have to look carefully and say, how do I implement my resources? How do I distribute them so that I get the maximum return on them? If it happens to be, let's say, a garbage can, where do I place it? Because there's time involved. And if somebody has to get up and walk to a garbage can, how much time are they wasting? And are they just going back to their desk? Or are they stopping and talking to people? How many hours per week, how many hours per year are you really losing as a result? I've seen this done with printers. When a company decides to put all its printers in one location, and then it discovers that it's lost millions of dollars because people are constantly going to the printer and wasting time talking to people. So again, it could be easier to just simply give everybody a printer, which is exactly what they ended up doing, and they saved money. So you have to evaluate very carefully how you utilize your resources, how you implement, and how you strategize. And this means a lot of planning is involved. So some of the areas that have diametrically changed in one way or another, areas that change and providing some kind of rationality why we need to upgrade our skill sets. There's been some big changes. As I said, when I was younger, managers didn't care. As far as I'm concerned, they didn't care very much. It was really a question of you have a task to do your task because I'm busy doing something else. They didn't want to get involved with you. But nowadays, they take a very different approach. Managers have to be more interested in the people functioning within their organization. They need to take advantage of the skills to augment those skills, to train people, to really hone their abilities. So, belief in human capital has changed. People look at human capital in a very different light than they used to. Once you've trained somebody, the worst case scenario is you have to let them go. It's really the last possibility. Demise of the command and control. If you were around in World War I or World War II, you were told to do something, you did it. You didn't question it. It was either black or white, do or don't. There's nothing in between, no grayscale. However, that's also the behavior that evolved out of the Second World War. This is something that's really important. When the Second World War ended and there was major industrial revolutions taking place, the behavior to most of the people coming back from the war was they were very much encouraged, do as you're told, don't question. But their children didn't act the same way. Okay, so you get some big changes. Their children, the what we often refer to as the baby boomers, they're different. They decided that they were going to work, but they were going to choose how they did it. And this is not the same thing. So the demise of the command and control, in other words, I tell you what to do and you do what you're told. We're also going to rename this a little bit later. We will actually give it a name. Emphasizing on teamwork. A lot of companies about 15 years ago thought that the key element was everybody work on their own. We used to call it the prima donna factor. We can even go 30 years back if you want to. That's that period of time. However, a lot of discoveries were made about people working in tandem and working as a collective. They work better. The results are faster. And not only are the results faster, but they're better quality. So working within a team became very, very important. And your ability and your soft skills became very important. Preeminence of technology. No company today can survive without some influence of technology. And it really does make a difference in many different areas. Even areas that you would consider are irrelevant and you don't need technology, technology can run circles around those. It's fascinating. Embrace of networking. Well, here's the bad news, guys. You can't do it alone. You need to have others. And the companies that deal with networking do really well. Not all of them, but most of them who really stick to it do really well. You often see that, let's say, a young woman with a couple of children comes up with a new idea for the clothing for the children, and she goes on social media, which is networking. And the next thing you know, she's a millionaire. Only because she learns how to network with one another. You know, there's other women out there looking, other men out there looking. So it's really a question of you got to network with people. And this becomes a necessity even for managers. You've got to learn how to do these things. When I was talking about the boards of trade, they're filled with managers looking for people to talk to and learn, is there something that we can offer? Or do you know somebody who needs what we need or what we have? New workforce expectations. Well, bad news, guys. Not everybody wants to work 40 hours a week. A lot of younger people nowadays, they want more me time. They want time for themselves. They want to enjoy life as opposed to their parents who worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. Nowadays, they want to really enjoy themselves. So they want high pay, they want instant gratification, and they also want something that gives them more time for themselves. And in many cases, for their families as well, if they happen to have families. Concern for the work-life balance is what I was just talking about. And also focus on speed. You know, it's hard to explain, but if you can't get it out the door immediately, people aren't happy. One of the biggest drawbacks to the Amazon Corporation, Amazon Books, was that it was taking too long for products to arrive. It could take an entire week. So Amazon went back to the drawing board and tried to figure out what could they do. And they came up with all kinds of solutions. And this is pre-COVID-19. So they found a variety of ways of getting the product to you overnight. In other words, you order it, the following day it arrives if you have a Prime account. And they've been really successful. In fact, their sales and their profitability has skyrocketed as a result. And as you probably noticed, they're building places all over the place. And these are million square foot buildings that they're building. So they're doing extremely well. But it's really a question of you focus on getting the customer satisfaction as fast as possible. And the other problem is if you wait too long, your competitor anywhere in the world will have responded. And just to give you a quick example, I ordered a thing here from China. It's for my cell phone. I put it on my belt. If I bought it here in Canada, it would cost me around 50 bucks. I bought it in China, it cost me $5. And they delivered. And it arrived in 3 days. So if you're not willing to speed up the process, your competitor will, and they will find a way. And maybe what they'll do is they'll stockpile close to where you live. And then all of a sudden they may be around the world, but they can push a button and have it sent to you the following morning, or even during the same day. There's a lot of possibilities here. But as a manager, you must be aware of these things. So here's another question for you. Question number 3. What is the makeup of the external environment of organizations, and how is an organization linked to its environment? So once again, think about it for a moment and give me some ideas. Wiki. Anybody out there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just not too sure.
Okay, well, think about it.
I'm not too sure either.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at a few possibilities. Think of the external environment. What is your external environment if you're running a business?
Customers, I guess.
Absolutely, customers.
I guess possible. Like if you're trying to buy a building, So I guess somebody selling to you, I don't know, a vendor?
You could, sure. Take a look at what I have here on the screen. Some of the problems that you can run into, you just mentioned customer. Maybe they're not spending any money, so that's economic. Maybe taxes, which I think most of us are going to be shocked when it comes tax time. They're spending so much money. Health of the economy. We know that our economy is suffering in the US, suffering worldwide in a sense. Different countries are in serious problems, but economically, it's really going to hit us in one form or another. So this means a lot of creativity is needed. How can we use a dollar and make that dollar stretch even further than it ever has before? Legal, political, well, the government is definitely going to help a little bit with the economy. The normalities, the customs are going to change. They have to change simply because of what's happening in Quebec right now. It's now illegal to walk around without a mask on. So this means mask sales will increase. It also means that people working will have to have a mask as well. It also means that face shields will sell more, and hopefully people will be able to go out and do what they've normally done. But this is also going to affect it. So customs and social values will change. Sociocultural, again, the philosophy, the objectives of the political parties involved. We have two major parties in Canada. And of course, they're always fighting with one another. So we really never know what's happening. The technology, again, development and availability of technology. You've been sleeping, technology has not. And there have been serious changes taking place. Some of the changes are unbelievable that are happening out there. So it's really a question of being aware of how much impact can that give you. I'm going to give you another example, just simply because it's a great example with technology. There was a kid in the States, and I probably even told you this in marketing, a kid in the States who actually begged his father. He became a real pain in the butt, kept asking his father, I want a 3D printer, I want a 3D printer. And finally, his father agreed, got him a 3D printer. And that kid makes more money than his father. How does he do it? Because the kid had an idea. He had been watching TV, and on TV there was a program about the cost involved in making prototypes. When companies want to introduce a new product, they have to make one. And it's really expensive to make one of anything, especially if it's metal. It's going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars. So here this kid decided, well, we could actually create 3D models, and then I could print them. And you could buy this. So you tell me what it is that you want a 3D model of, and I can make it for you overnight. Imagine that kid is now introducing something that a machine shop will probably take weeks and probably even months to make. This kid can print it overnight, even though it's only going to be plastic. And nowadays, by the way, you can print in metal as well. So this kid actually started making a fortune. His father now works for him. Again, technology has come a long way. There are a lot of kids out there who are making their own websites. I even gave you an example of a 14-year-old who was actually selling websites, had his own Square account, which I absolutely adored. I think that kid was brilliant. I wish he was mine. Natural environment is another thing. So nature and also the conditions of the environment. We want to make sure it's sustained. We want to make sure it's not destroyed. So again, it's really a question of how do all of these elements come into vogue? How do they actually interact with your particular organization and your intention within that corporation or company or endeavor? So here we have one, which is the environment for Starbucks. And we'll take the top to start with, the economic environment. So economic growth is the fundamental, but you have to make sure that your coffee is the right price. And more specifically, you have to know who the people are who buy your particular brand of coffee. Every one of the coffee producers, they all have their own market. Some of them have a higher end market, some of them a lower end market, like McDonald's has a lower end market. And then, of course, you have Wendy's, which is slightly in the same category. So unemployment rate becomes really important too, because do unemployed people buy as much coffee? Probably not. They're not going to work every day, and therefore they don't need the coffee to wake them up in the morning. So, of course, sales are going to be diminished somewhat. Disposable income. Well, if they're working, then they have more money in their pocket than they have to spend for rent and clothing and other things. So they're going to have a little extra money available, disposable, and they'll buy the coffee and they'll buy the cakes and other things that they get at Starbucks. Social cultural environment, once again, population, has it changed? I think I gave you the example before that it takes 5 years for a McDonald's to decide to move into an area. And the reason is you have to ensure that the market is there. If it's just an older market, they may not bother to open up. But if it's a younger, let's say up and coming market, they definitely will open up a store if there's enough of them. Educational system, again, this is all qualified because it suggests that you have a better quality of people who will be coming into your store. Health and nutritional values of the products that you're selling, and are people looking for them? These all have to be taken into consideration. Technological, the infrastructure within the stores. Do you have the equipment that allows you to make things fast? Because remember, this is fast food. And if you have to wait too long, you don't come back unless you have unlimited time and don't care. So the information systems that they have and also the equipment that they have, it has to be really well thought out. Natural environment, once again, do they interfere with the environment or are they working to help build it again? So these are things that actually give them quite an advantage. They also are highly aware of their legal position and they make sure that they are compliant with all the rules and regulations, business forms, the political trends, they're monitoring all the time. Because as you probably noticed what just happened in China a few days ago, they decided to take away the property of everybody. Anybody who has anything, they take it away from you. And now it belongs to the state. So a lot of people, even where their homes and their, let's say their farms or what have you, have been held for 500, 600 years, they just lost it overnight. And if they didn't like it, they got beaten up and thrown in jail. So we look at all of these different things so that we can understand the environment for the business that you are running. And for Starbucks, it's a little bit, let's say, upper crust. The coffee is a little different. The lattes are a little different than what maybe you would get out of McDonald's. And therefore, some of the products that they sell are more expensive. So as a result, you can actually look around and find out what is my environment going to do to my business as time elapses? How will I look a year from now or 2 years? Should I actually be open here or should I move? All of these things have to be taken into consideration. And then, of course, the training as well. Specific task environment. So in this case here, some of the specific tasks, we look at the organization, the groups, the persons to whom the organization interacts with and conducts business. This is really important. Who are your suppliers? Who are the customers? Who are the local political groups? Who are the children in the areas? What is the environment really like? So we look at some of these elements, such as, let's say, the stakeholders. As I said before, and I've said this in the marketing course for sure, there is absolutely zero value in any business going broke, none whatsoever. In fact, there's a harmful effect. It's like dropping a stone into a puddle. If a business goes broke, people lose jobs, they don't spend money anymore, and it has a detrimental effect, even though it might be small, but it can ripple over time. So we look at our customers. Who are they? What are their interests? What are we trying to satisfy? Remember, I've said this again in marketing as well, and I've said this over and over again. You only create a business to satisfy the need of a customer. It's the only reason for the existence of the business. And therefore, everything is focused on what they're looking for. The suppliers as well, because they need your support. And by the way, without your income coming into them, they're not doing very well. So they need you to be very successful as well. So this affects you. And their well-being also is affecting you. Your competitors are affecting you. How many of them, or if they're healthy? You just need one competitor to screw up royally and to do a lot of damage to the industry, and all of the companies lose out. Every last one of them. If a company discovers that they have issues with the food supply, everybody begins to second guess all the suppliers of food. So you really do have to keep your competitors in mind as well. Whatever they do is going to affect you. Regulators, they could pass new bills tomorrow that would change the way you do business. There's a lot of those, by the way. A lot of changes take place almost on a monthly basis every time they get together. Investors and also the owners, well, they want something too. The people who own the business, the people who are investing in your business, the people who are providing you with some kind of, let's say, discounts or something of that nature. All these people are part of your environment, and they have an immediate impact on you. Just keep in mind that each one of them has a part to play, and they can either make your company or they can kill your company. When you start a little business, sometimes you don't have a lot of money, so you make agreements with your suppliers. Sometimes you don't have a lot of money. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine had a building, very large building, and couldn't afford to pay the rent. So he made a deal with the owner of the building that every time he sold something, the owner of the building would get a significant portion of the profit first. In many cases, would get all the profit simply to keep himself in business and keep paying as much as he possibly could. He got through it. He did extremely well afterwards, but it was what he had to do. And once again, the investors also have the ability to help you or to sink you. And that goes for customers, suppliers. To give you another example here for customers, there's a restaurant that was in, where was it again? Lindsay, Ontario. Quite a while ago, this is about 10 years ago. And the customers, actually, they noticed that the owner of the restaurant wasn't doing very well. And they loved going there. They loved the persona, they loved the atmosphere, but they recognized that he wasn't doing very well. He couldn't spruce it up. And the owner of the building actually said they would help a little bit. And the customers actually came in and they purchased 49% of the restaurant. In other words, they provided him with enough money to fix it up and to get it up to specs. So sometimes your customers can be your biggest helpers as well. And sometimes your competitors. Remember, maybe their customers don't like them anymore, so they can push them onto you if they own you. So there's a possibility there as well. Value creations is creating value for the satisfaction and the needs of the constituencies. So whoever it is, customer, supplier, competitor, regulator, investor, owner, anyone, these people can actually assist you in building your particular business, or they can tear it down. Stakeholders are very important to a company, and they don't have to have what they think is a vested interest. Just you may have a vested interest or a non-vested interest in a little business, let's say on the lakeshore. Maybe you've never heard of it. Maybe you've never been there. Maybe you'll never see it. Maybe you'll never visit it. But if it ever went broke, it would release staff, and that staff would be unemployed and they wouldn't spend money. And where they would normally be spending it, they'll have to release somebody and they won't be spending that money. And the next thing you know, there's a ripple, and that ripple tends to move faster and faster and faster. So everybody has a vested interest in the survival and also the profitability of all businesses. Multiple stakeholders in the environment, and it just gives us a general idea. It isn't just the employees. There's all these other people as well. Let's say political system. Well, here's the bad news. You can't have good infrastructure, in other words, plumbing, and you can't have good clean water, and you can't have electricity, and you can't have nice roads if you don't have enough money going into local government. And you can't have schools, and you can't have health care. In the United States, they don't collect as much tax as they do in Canada. And of course, healthcare is not a guarantee. A lot of doctors refuse to accept Medicare simply because they never get paid. So in Canada, you're given a lot of things, but it does cost a little bit more. So that means there's more people involved. And as it points out here, this is kind of like a giant circle. It's almost like buzzards, all looking for their little bit of your company. But the good news is it's reciprocal. They all have a reaction on your business. They all have a positive climate that they create within your business. One of the things that's really important to understand about any kind of offering to a client, and that means any kind of business offering, is you have to have something of value. And that's your competitive advantage. What is it? Maybe it is the design of your cell phone. Maybe it is the apps that it can have. Maybe it happens to be the bottle of water you have and the amount of water that's in it, how clean it is. Maybe it happens to be the car, what color schemes are available, what kind of interior. Whatever that competitive advantage is, it has to be better than anyone else's. So the core competencies that clearly set an organization apart from its competitors, it's whatever gives it a major advantage. Remember, you go to the store, you buy yourself a hamburger, but which one do you buy? Well, each one is different. If you go to McDonald's, their core competency is that they supply your hamburger in seconds. If you go to Wendy's, it takes you a minute. If you go to another store, you may have to wait 5 minutes while they cook it for you. But every one of them has some particular advantage. To give you a really good example, for McDonald's, if you know a little bit about their history, there is actually a video. There's a movie about McDonald's, which is fundamentally correct. There are some issues in it, but one of the things that gave them the superior advantage over all the competition, whenever you went to a place during that period of time, you would often see maybe 1 or 2 people, maybe 3 or 4 people. But when you went to a McDonald's, you'd see a lineup of maybe 20 or 30 people. And the reason was they were so fast. They had 1 employee to do each task. So if somebody put ketchup on, that's all they did. If somebody put a patty on, that's all they did. And this meant that they had an assembly line that was really, really fast. That was their core advantage. So their competitive advantage was they could get it out really fast. So achieving a competitive advantage, it might be your cost. You found a way of reducing your cost rather significantly. Higher quality. Your quality is beyond everybody else's quality, and therefore people like you more. Better delivery. Maybe you're able to get the product to them faster than anyone else. So I gave you the example with Amazon. What you probably have also noticed is that Walmart was watching Amazon really carefully, and they have now incorporated the same thing. In fact, it was a company in British Columbia, which was two brothers, and they actually started this off, this whole little delivery thing. So they've actually been able to maximize it. Now, many other companies have jumped in there as well now. So they're not the first, they were the first, but they're not the only ones. Better delivery. It could also be greater flexibility. I can tell you that there are a lot of little companies that make a fortune only because they can do what the big companies can't. A large company must have meetings to determine the feasibility, the viability, and also the economics of something. Whereas a little company can overnight produce it, like that kid with his 3D printer. Or it could be somebody sitting at home with their kids and having people send them files of audio where they're typing it up and sending it back again as a completed document. Or it could be a PowerPoint, or it could be an Excel document, or it could be anything. But it just takes a little bit of creativity. It's really surprising. So here we have another little matrix. Environmental uncertainty, lack of information regarding what exists and what developments may occur in the external environment. Let's face it, no one saw COVID-19 coming except the Chinese. No one saw it. So you didn't know how to react to it. And there was a tremendous amount of confusion. There still is. And that's an advantage, oddly enough. High, moderate uncertainty. When we look at this here, the rate of change in the environment and the complexity of the environment, where is your business situated? And if it's a question of low uncertainty or high, moderate uncertainty, or it's super high uncertainty, or it's low, moderate uncertainty, we look at how complex is the environment that we're involved in. And not only that, but how quickly do things change within our environment? One person noted a little while ago that within the toothbrush, and I'm picking on it because I was watching a video on the weekend, within the toothbrush era, nothing has changed in over 200 years. Nothing has changed. The same toothbrush is a toothbrush is a toothbrush. Now you have electric ones, but it's still a toothbrush and it has brushes on it. But one fella who is a dentist actually took a closer look and has come up with an ultraviolet light. You put it in your mouth and it cleans your teeth. So it's a complete change of everything. Of course, his problem will be getting the price down. That's the biggest issue for new products. But in this case here, how much change takes place? And what happens to disruption? If you disrupt the environment, can you successfully use that environment, or will it use you? Again, it's really a question of how uncertainty plays out. And you definitely need information. This is why managers need to do research. They need to be watching the competition. They need to watch the genre. They need that category that they're in. They need to know what's going on. And what's coming along that could actually disrupt everything? For most of the automotive manufacturers in the world, they've been building cars for a long time, and they've been making them using fuel, combustible fuel. But now there's an electric market coming along, and it's really beginning to bite. It's taking more and more of the market away. So a lot of them in panic mode, literally panic mode, have been throwing cars together, trying to compete and stay in the business because they recognize that there is going to be a shift. Some point or another within the next few years, there's going to be a gigantic shift, especially for automobiles. How uncertain is milk? Really good question. Is market experience high? Rate of change? Is the market complex? What do you guys think? What do you think? Now everybody's running back to their computer. What do you guys think? Knock, knock. Anybody home?
Yeah, I'm here. I just had to re-sign in for some reason. It kicked me out, but I could still hear. I just couldn't sign in. Is the market? Sorry, could I actually get the question again?
Yep. It's how uncertain is milk? Is there high complexity, low complexity, or is there, for instance, is the market experiencing a high rate of change?
It'd be low complexity, low rate of change because milk's milk. Yeah. So I don't think there's going to be much competitors coming in. It's probably not going to change much from the choices we already have. And yeah.
Okay. How about the rest of you?
Yeah, I think it'll be a low rate and low rate change in the environment and also a low rate market complex.
Okay. So here's the conundrum. Milk has undergone tremendous attacks. One of the biggest issues here is it comes from an animal, and a lot of people have been complaining about the way cows are treated. The other thing is the pricing. As it becomes more and more expensive to feed cows and sheep and also goats, because you get milk from all three of them, one of the issues has been the cost. And a lot of people have been switching over to some of the alternatives. And as you probably have noticed, if you've gone to Walmart recently, there's a lot of substitutes. There's all kinds of other milk, rice milk, granola milk, or whatever, all kinds of different types. Coconut milk, which is something I use all the time, anyhow. But there's lots of different variations, and they're cheaper. When you look at the
Okay,
actual costs.
Sir, before you move on,
Yep.
when you said milk, I use like general milk. Like every time, like how you describe the different types of milk, I just use all of the milk.
Okay.
Yeah, which is why I gave low uncertainty and low complex market.
Okay. That's a great way of covering yourself. However, I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in there. So, yes, you definitely can equate this as being a variety of different milks. But what I'm trying to get across to you is that there's a migration. As younger people look for variations, they're looking for a lot of different what is the value? What can I get from it? Even with the milks, people have started to turn away from the alternatives. So now they're going towards juices. And as you probably noticed, juices are getting cheaper as they're beginning to take some of the, let's say, some of the fruit that didn't ripen very well. They're now making juices out of that instead of just simply discarding it or using it for, let's say, feed for cows and chickens and that. So they're beginning to use all of that product. And because they're using it, the prices have dropped for the alternatives. We talked about this in marketing, where the alternatives become much cheaper. People switch. They want to try something new. And especially younger people are always listening to the YouTubes and some of the other, WhatsApp and all the rest of this stuff as they look at Facebook, etc. When they're looking at these things, they're looking at what people are saying about all the health benefits and all the other stuff. And of course, they're switching. So sales of juices have actually skyrocketed. Prices on pop has dropped, and a lot of companies aren't producing the amount of pop they used to actually produce. And that goes for milk as well. Milk is having difficulties sustaining the market. They will still continue to sell, yes, but prices may start to go up a little bit. Again, remember, it's really based on a lot of different factors. It's not just one factor. So when it comes to complexity,
So
yep,
sorry.
no,
So milk is gonna go down like regular cow milk. The need for it's gonna go down, but the price is gonna go up. Is it's like gonna become a rarity, I guess, or
well,
why
not
would it? Why would it?
we're not talking about next year. We're talking about years yet to come. But yes, the answer will be very similar. You've got to keep in mind that it costs a lot of money to feed an animal. Cows and horses and things like that, they eat an enormous amount. They eat, if you look at them, they eat about 60% of the day. So they're constantly eating. And if you're supplying them with hay and other meal, other types of food, and some of those things are preservatives and other things that you're feeding them so that they will grow faster and produce more milk. The problem is it gets expensive. One of the things that, unless you've been on a farm, I don't know if any three of you have been on a farm, but when it comes to dealing with livestock, veterinarians are a necessity. They get hurt a lot. And sometimes when the animals get sick, you may have to even remove the animal, and it may have already infected quite a few other ones. So you may run into serious issues. Costs are very high for this production. And of course, now we have wages as well. And just to kind of throw the whole thing into a comparison in a sense and show you the difference. When I was a kid, you could buy a tractor for $500. $500, you could get a fairly good secondhand tractor. Nowadays, to buy a combine, which is the equivalency, is about $1 million. And that's a cheap one. So farmers need more money, and that means livestock, there's going to be a lot of costs involved. It used to be to build a barn would cost you maybe $3,000, $4,000. Nowadays, it costs you about $180,000 to $200,000 to build the barn. And if you have to repair one, most farmers don't even bother anymore. They give up. So when you go into a barn, you'll notice there's a lot of gaps and there's a lot of holes and a lot of wood that's falling apart. And the reason is simple, it's just too expensive. So why I say that this is kind of like in the middle for milk is because there's a lot of substitutes that became cheaper. And of course, people move towards how can they save money in one form or another. As long as they know it's safe, then they're willing to do that. Of course, as they begin to produce more of it, the alternatives, then of course the prices start going up because there's a bigger demand. And that means people jump back to the original milk. But because when they're ready to jump back, the farmers have put out so much money and aren't getting enough back, prices go up. So there's an effect. It's kind of a rippling effect, very similar to losing people. When you drop something like an alternative into the marketplace, it has a dramatic impact. It does take time, but that's the rationality I'm using. I'm just simply looking at it from all angles at the same time. And with juices nowadays, and there are many juices that are really cheap out there. What I do right now for orange juice has become super cheap. I get those little containers, they're a liter and they're $1 each. So I buy 10 or 20 of them and then just throw them in the fridge. And when I'm ready, I can start drinking from them. And I know it's not the best oranges that ever existed, but I know the juice is the juice. So it doesn't make any difference. It's just, it brings the price down. And I don't think I've had milk now for a good 10 years. I don't think I've ever used milk after at least 10 years ago, I stopped buying milk. So I buy other things. I buy coconut milk, which is cheaper, especially when it's on sale at Walmart. So you buy it at $1 a tin. Fantastic. Does that kind of make sense a little bit?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So really what I'm trying to do is look at it from many angles and trying to see what is the true external impact to anything. And that goes for employees as well, because, it just takes one machine and that eliminates hundreds of jobs. Just one machine. You just have to look at it for what are the impacts that are coming into existence and what is the impact that they're trying to achieve, because it will affect you somehow. So as it points out here, they're saying there is no rate of change. So high rate of change, no. I say it's a moderate change. And is the market complex? No, it's a stable competition. That's not necessarily true anymore. It is a competition. There is competition for milk. And there are substitutes. So how uncertain is electricity? So first of all, you need to understand something about electricity. Electricity can be created, but it must be used when it's created. You can't store it very well. If you store it, you can only store it in certain volumes. And this is where most companies have been working really frantically, trying to figure out density. How can I put more electrons inside of some kind of composite that we can then draw from it without losing too much? Again, this is a complex issue, but the question now becomes, how uncertain is electricity? What do you think? Will there be a high rate of change? Is the market complex?
For sure, there is definitely going to be a high rate of change, just because I guess they're trying to make electricity, I guess, so much more compact when it comes to power, and then there's going to be so much more power stations for cars because they're trying to make it electricity or electrical too. So yeah, for sure, there's going to be a high complexity.
Okay. How about the rest of you? What do you think? So let me give you a little food for thought then. How uncertainty is electricity? Let's take a look at some of the things that are affecting us. Elon Musk is trying to make it so that most factories would eventually be able to have their own power grid, maybe by using solar. He's released a product within the last year, which is a better solar cell. It's still not the most effective. And of course, wind generation. You just need to take a trip up north here. I've done that many times. There are thousands of windmills up there producing electricity. I'm not talking the little ones, I'm talking the giants, miles and miles and miles of them. So, yes, we're producing electricity that way. We're also producing electricity from waves, so currents within water. And of course, there are new ways of actually producing electricity. So, how uncertain is it? It's difficult to say because there are many people working diligently trying to find solutions. So, is there a high rate of change? Yes, there is. And how complex is it? It's very complex. And there are lots of alternatives. Battery technology, as I said, is changing dramatically. And some of the ways we produce power, if you happen to have, let's say, a river near your property, or on your property, I should say, you could just simply put a little paddle wheel in there and put a generator on it and produce electricity, and that would be year round. So unfortunately, because of the law in Ontario, you'd have to sell it to the province and then they would sell it back to you. Really kind of idiotic process. However, again, there are many alternatives that are coming out. And of course, there are different types of things. I don't know if you studied any physics or any science in school when you went to school as a kid, but you recognize that if you take a copper pipe and you take a piece of magnesium and you stick them apart, maybe a foot or 10 feet or 50 feet, it's up to you, then put a line on both of them. In other words, put a wire and you can light a light bulb simply because the earth will also produce electricity for you. So lots of different possibilities. And it's really a question of, yes, there are alternatives. And as time goes on, there'll be even more. So there will be lots of competition in this particular area as well. And there already is. So very high uncertainty. We really don't know what's going to happen in that area. Effectiveness within an organization, managers really need to know their business. You've got to know the industry you're in. You can't just simply guess at it. You got to know it. So sustaining high performance in using resources, this means you need to know how to implement your strategy. If I have a printer, where do I put it? Do I know how much time will be required to access it? If I have, let's say, a desk, how many people will use it? Will I get my money back from that? You really have to know how to strategically implement the resources you have, and that includes the people, to make sure that you're getting the maximum return and you are consistently working towards effectiveness. So system resources, approach focused on resource acquisition. What do I get? When we talked about marketing, we also talked about the necessity to be able to pick the right products. We talked about this in Intro to Business as well, where it's really important that you just don't run out and buy what's on sale. You look at the longevity and the utility of it, especially for a business. It's got to last. And also internal processes, they've got to be efficient. You can't have a process that doesn't work very well and takes forever to work its way out. You've got to have something that's really highly efficient. I'll give you a quick example. One of our instructors, her husband works in a small company where they have cubicles. And they were noticing that they had planned it so that each person in line would actually have the next cubicle. So if you had to pass work to somebody else, it would be to the next cubicle. So they found that many of their employees were standing up and walking around the cubicle to the entrance of the next cubicle. So, so one of the managers, probably having a screw loose somewhere, decided to put a hole through the cubicle so that they could simply put their hand through with the document that had to be transferred to the next cubicle. So it's just a process, and it was kind of idiotic, but it worked. It reduced the amount of time it took to get up and walk around. Remember, it doesn't seem like much, and you really have to take these things for the total value. For an employee to have to walk 10 feet, it's going to take them a minimum of 5 to 7 seconds. But they're going to stop at the printer. They're going to look at the paper that they've just printed. So add another 2 or 3 seconds. Then they have to go back and sit down. Bad part. As soon as they sit down, they're going to have to analyze what they've just done. And that's going to take them a minute or two to get back into working again. So when we look at this, we don't look at the few seconds. What we look at is the total. And then we multiply it by the number of times they have to do this. And what you often discover is within a year, you've lost maybe an entire week. You paid the employee for a week of just getting off their butt and walking over to the printer. So this is why managers really do have to analyze and scrutinize and determine where should something be. We also have the goal approach. So focusing on the accomplishments is the key objective. We need something done. We're not too concerned how it gets done. We just need it to be done within a certain period of time. And again, we analyze very carefully. How can we reduce the steps? So if one person is 5 steps away, could it be possible to bring them 5 steps closer? Okay, there might be a way of actually bringing them within 2 feet closer. Well, 2 feet is still a few seconds. We start adding it up, it's days. And also strategic constituencies. So focusing on all of those people who have a vested interest in your survival. Again, we want to know what the impact is for them as we exist and how we produce our product. So here's another question for you, and then we're going to take a break. So who are managers and what do they actually do? Who are these crazy people? And it basically tells us support and helps the activities and the efforts in performing accomplishment of others. They take the raw materials, which may be the employees, it may be the desks, the chairs, the location, the machinery, whatever it is, and they implement it in a strategy that they believe will have the maximum return. So when you actually are in a location that has cubicles in it, it should have been designed by the manager so that it has a natural flow and that the information is, let's say, located within a very strategic location so that things and information can flow easily, or that it's recognizable as a process. A manager needs to look very carefully at what are the resources that the staff need, what are the resources that will last the longest, and it may not be the most pretty, the most beautiful, it may not have the nice little floral patterns on it, but it's effective and it does what it's supposed to do. So they have to support these people, but it means planning, and planning is crucial. Levels of management, there are 3 defined levels. The first level, for your sake, is top management. This is all senior managers. Could also incorporate not just senior managers, but also directors. And I'm not talking about executive directors, I'm talking about regular directors. And sometimes in a company, instead of giving them the title of manager or senior manager, they often give them the title of director of a department. So top manager is responsible for the organization as a whole. They're the ones who are charting its course. They want to know that this particular course of action will lead them in a profitable direction. And they're the ones who should really understand that particular industry as a whole. Middle managers, day-to-day operations, they're the ones who are planning these top managers' plans and breaking them into month by month. They're breaking it right down, all the way down to the week by week process. And they're charging their particular department. So they're in charge of just their departments. And therefore, they should be very knowledgeable about what is happening and what the outcome needs to be. Team leaders, supervisors, and I'd say first line managers, these are the people who deal with the day-to-day operations. So they're the ones who are trying to make those middle manager plans work, and middle managers are trying to make the top managers' plans work. So we're really looking at a break it down and try to do it step by step from the ground up. So team leaders and supervisors are doing the day-to-day operations, and they're implementing the strategies of where to put something, how to make sure that they have the right staff in place and the right skill sets. Super duper. So managers, and this is actually important because it affects both the for-profit and the not-for-profit as well. So typical businesses, nonprofit organizations, they do follow this particular pattern. In the nonprofit, we don't normally say board of directors, we say the board of trustees, because board of directors, they own a piece of the company. Trustees are, let's say, holding in trust the operations of the company. And of course, we can break this down from top managers, and this is the people at the very top of the company, chief executive officer or chair, president, vice presidents, and then a middle manager, first line managers, supervisors, and sometimes department heads, in other words, a manager. And of course, the Indians at the bottom. So in other words, the non-managerial workers. It's important to recognize how things function. The senior managers create the fundamental plans for the next 5 years. The middle managers try to do this on a yearly basis and break it down to month by month. How will we make our targets every month that will give us an advantage to achieve those yearly goals or yearly plans? And of course, when we get down near the bottom here, the frontline managers or first line managers, these are the individuals who are literally doing the day-to-day, week-to-week function. And they're trying to do their part to make sure that the plans actually become, let's say, fruition. They actually move towards fruition of those plans. So the good news is I'm going to stop for a little while. We're going to have a break. We don't have much to go yet, but we still have a little bit. And therefore, we're going to take a break until, let's just see, what do we got here? It is 3:18. So let's say 35. Let's say 40. So at 3:40, we'll meet back again and we'll continue with this. Make sense?
Yo. That's cool.
Yes, sir. Sir, I do have a question. Well, not
Yep.
really a question. I went back to Brightspace, but when I click on the textbook, it keeps sending me to bookshelf. So I think I'm going to need. I can't see the textbook. I refreshed the screen. I signed out, signed back in. I don't see it. It's only sending me over to bookshelf.
Bookshelf.
Yeah.
My knowledge of Brightspace is really limited. What I need you to do is contact Lilani
Yeah.
and tell her the problem you're having with it.
Okay.
And she'll contact the people who need to activate it for you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
So let's take a break until 3:40 and then we'll come back again.
Sounds good.
Fantastic. Are we all back? I'm back. Yes, indeed. Fantastic. Good
Same, I'm
job.
back.
Fantastic. So let's keep going. Now, Kutisha, did you get your book yet, or knock knock? No. Did you send an email to Leilani? Okay. I've also sent one. I've also contacted the academic services as well. Okay, so let's keep going with this. Eventually they'll solve the book problem. Here we go. So some of the types of managers that you'll run into, and we need to know these for the test. So line managers, these are the people responsible for day-to-day operations. These are the ones right at the bottom of the pyramid. These are the people dealing with day-to-day operations and staff. Staff managers using technical expertise to advise and support the effect of the line workers. So these are the people who are working kind of like intermediaries between middle management and also the line managers. In addition to this, functional managers, and these are responsible for a single activity within the company. This could be that they are dealing with shipping only, or they're dealing with, let's say, packaging only, but they have a single function. General managers, they basically cover the gambit. So any particular activity within their particular department, they're responsible for. So are responsible for more complex units that involve many different functional areas, usually containing many departments. Administrators, once again, this is something that a couple of you are working towards. So administrators work in public and nonprofit organizations. These are people similar to a line manager or a staff manager, and they have the same functionality. Performance and accountability. Well, accountability, once again, is a very important element. Requirement of one person to answer to a higher authority, accountable for the next level of management above them. And also effective managers fulfill performance accountability by helping others to achieve high performance. The whole idea here is working with one another, working with other departments, and also working with their own staff, so their own subordinates. Each department should be functioning as a whole. High performance managers, well, what are unique about these individuals are well informed of their team's needs. They are watching all the time. Remember, your particular team of subordinates are working for the betterment of that department, but they're working on your plan. So they're living up to your expectations. You need to coach them, you need to work with them, and you need to know what is needed by that particular department. They work alongside their supervisors. In other words, they are very much aware of what's going on within their particular departments, providing advice and also developing support for their teams. And this could actually be manipulating or moving around different resources so that it works more effectively and more efficiently. And they help their people perform the best of their abilities. Again, providing them with adequate resources and training is really important, and providing them with the opportunity to actually explore those capabilities. The upside down pyramid, reflecting the changes nature of work today. Manager's job is to support the workers, whereas once upon a time it wasn't. It was just to provide instruction. Do this, do that, and that was it. Nowadays, we're expected to assist the actual employee in one form or another. whole organization is devoted to servicing one thing only. And I keep reiterating on this, it is the customer. What the customer's expectation is what we're trying to satisfy. So they show you the top level is near the bottom of the pyramid. So in this case here, customers and clients, that's the largest area. Therefore, support from the key management, the high management, must filter all the way to the customer because that's where everything is focused. So all the plans, all the strategies, they're all focused towards the expectations and also how that customer is interacting with your company. So here's another question for you, number 5. What is the management process and how do you learn managerial skills and competencies? These are the 4, let's say we'll call them the 4 corners in a sense, because that's what they really are. You need to plan, and that's the first thing a manager has to start to study. They have to know what their environment is all about. They have to know how it's situated within the organization, and they have to know what part it plays within the field that they're in. So planning is really important. How do I implement my resources in a way that provides a realistic, let's say, return or fulfills the obligations of the upper level plan? So the upper management plans. We look at those strategic plans and we're trying to fit into them. The organizing of the resources, well, we want to make sure we have the right implementation of people, equipment, and space. So we try to figure it out. And therefore, once again, we may have to manipulate a little bit, but we implement a plan for that. We also have to coach. We have to educate. So we're trying to inspire those particular people. So we're leading them. We're trying to get them to follow along with our vision of what is necessary for that particular company. And the last one is the evaluation process. We call it controlling. So measuring performance and taking action. If it's not working, stop it, start something new, change it dramatically, make an effort to stay on top of things. That's what the controlling is really all about. It's almost like full circle. We plan, we organize, we lead, and then we evaluate, did it work or didn't it work? If not, tweak the process, go through the process again. This is the fundamentals of what managers are responsible for. And it's really important because it also defines that managers are responsible for defining what work is. And they do so by planning, organizing, leading, and controlling the process. So management is the process of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. And this is through the utilization and the utility of all the resources that are available to them. And this is, as they point out here, a continuous process. It's not a one-shot deal. So breaking down each one of these different functions is important. You need to always manage your particular environment and ensure that you have implemented your strategy correctly, that you're getting the return you wanted, and that's where your control comes into it. But you may actually have to relocate, organize, or evaluate how things are being partitioned, where things are being placed, where individuals are being implemented. Do I have the right people on the right shift? Do I have them in the right positions? And then, of course, leading them into the direction that you're trying to accomplish. So managerial activities and also the roles, you have very specific roles that are necessary as a manager. One of them is ensuring that people know exactly what's happening around them. It used to be that managers simply told you, you have a job, be happy you have a job, keep your mouth shut, and do what you're told. That's not the way it is anymore. People want to know, they want to feel like they participate. So it's very important for managers to be the information source. Otherwise, you get the grapevine, and the grapevine is not a good thing because it really causes problems. You want to make sure that information is timely and it is provided in a way that the employees can understand it. So, involving giving, receiving, and also analyzing the information that's available to you and also interpreting it. So, interpersonal roles as well, involving interactions with persons inside and outside of the workplace. Managers spend a lot of time with their employees, but they also spend time with people outside the company. And this may be for assisting them to develop strategies for customers or suppliers or somebody else entirely. Decisional roles, they also make decisions within the company for their particular departments. And this is why you hired them in the first place, was to be able to lead that particular department. So involving using the information they've gathered and making appropriate decisions that give the company the right return and move them along their goal strategy. So here we have a particular scenario. Oops, we had a scenario. So Mitzberg's 10 managerial roles. Again, it's just broken down into those three areas of interpersonal, informational, and decision. And it's broken down into what they actually accomplish. The key element here for interpersonal is ensuring that everyone within the company and within their department is kept up to speed at what's going on, and that they are the go-to person. So you don't have to run around looking for somebody to actually provide information to. They're the one that you're focused on. And for information, once again, they are maintaining a complete observation of what is going on, and they're the one who disseminates the information. So you don't listen to other people, you focus on what they tell you, because they're the ones who know what's going on in the background. When it comes to decisions, they are making decisions based on everything they have been able to collect about not only their department, but what's going on outside as well. So when it comes to shifts, proportioning, putting people into those shifts, making sure they have and hire the right people, these are decisions made based on what they have been able to collectively take in and make proper decisions based on that information. So I mentioned this before. One of the things a lot of people just don't grasp is that management is not exactly all the glitz and glamour and everything else that you think it is. Everybody wants to be in charge, but sometimes they don't realize just how much is required, how much you have to pay for that job. And that means with your efforts. So managers work very long hours. Believe it, it's true. If a manager is in a progressive location, in a business that is moving and mobile and actually doing extremely well, that individual is working 10, 12-hour days. In most cases, they're even working weekends in some situations. It depends on what the circumstances are. But in most cases, managers don't have time within their offices because there are people dropping in who have questions, who need answers. There's other departments they have to attend meetings for, and they have to prepare for those meetings as well. And they also have to make sure that they're trying to get their work done. So managers do tend to work very long hours. They really do. And most times companies will give them a day in lieu of, make them work at home, in other words, where they can relax and nobody's dropping in. But of course, we live in a 20th century and there are emails. So emails still come in large quantities. And most managers nowadays also have a company cell phone. which means that messaging is going to be taking place between managers. And I got news for you. Sometimes it's overwhelming just how much they have to do. So managers work with an intense pace. They can't afford the luxury of sitting back and watching. They really do have to do many different functions at once. Sometimes they're well paid and sometimes they're not. There are times when, in certain situations, the employees make far more than the managers do. And sometimes the employees usually don't do as much work as the managers, but the managers still have their positions. So manager works with a fragmented and also a varied task, a little bit here, a little bit there, trying to get it done, and yet at the same time, trying to orchestrate it so that everything gets done within a reasonable time. Managers work with many communications medium. Got news for you. They work with anything that is available that company has supplied them. And as you can imagine nowadays, not only texting, not only phone calls, not only emails, not only faxes, but also working with Teams and Zoom and a variety of other sources as well. Managers work largely through interpersonal relationships, definitely working with one another. This is very important to them. They are expected to be able to control the resources that are under their control. That means the people, that means the equipment, and making sure that it is structured in such a way that their department is able to achieve the task that has been assigned to it. And once again, those tasks come from the senior executive plan. Middle management breaks it down, and it's up to the managers to make it happen. So some of the skills that are necessary in this situation, well, we basically know that skills are very important for anyone in a company, but some of the skills that are really, really important in this case are these three, but it depends on the level you are working from. So we can actually assume that technical skills are definitely necessary for people doing day-to-day operations. And that means you need technical skills to do planning. You need technical skills to implement your strategies. When it comes to human and interpersonal skills, coaching, training, observation, evaluation, there's a lot of different areas here, personal communications, and of course, team communications. When it comes to conceptual, we usually reserve this for the highest level of management. Because the highest level tends to work with grandiose ideas. They work with the big picture. They're trying to maneuver the company in a profitable way within the industry and to miss all the pit holes and some of the problems that exist out there. They're trying to avoid them. So we look at them for the conceptual side, but it still effectively is used by all levels of management. Conceptual simply means you can see the big picture of your department and you can focus on getting to the end result of it. So you can perceive the potential and the opportunities and also how it might be necessary for you to focus your attentions and your resources. And it kind of gives us a general idea here as to the necessity. Technical skills, kind of low when it comes to upper management. They don't need to know the day-to-day operations. They need to know how month to month works and how and what is actually necessary to make some adjustments so that they can get the results they need. It sometimes seems a little strange that these people are constantly looking for ways of saving a dollar, but when you're thinking about the competition out there, sometimes that dollar is the difference between closing the doors of the company and keeping it open. So each person within this company, whether it's the person doing day-to-day operations or the person at the highest level of management, they all are very important. Each one of them is fulfilling a very necessary task. If you ever run a company for yourself, you'll understand what I mean. It's nice to be able to give some kind of function to someone else so that you don't have to do it all. And that's the key element here. If everyone does exactly what they're assigned to, and they do it with passion, and they do it really well, then that company is going to do well. In spite of itself, it will still do well. Some of the competencies that are really important for managers, and we're coming to the end of this chapter, is they must know how to communicate. Now, I've stressed this before in Intro to Business, and I said it again in Human Resources and Marketing. The most important element within almost all management is your ability to communicate. The better you are at communicating, the better you can move forward. And really, when you look at some of the senior executives in a company, it's their ability to communicate that really gives them the advantage. They still have to really understand their industry and they need to know their stuff, but communicating is the difference. Teamwork, your ability to work within a team, because you're not the only manager, there'll be others, and you need to work with them and they need to work with you. So this is a requirement. And self-management, well, you have so many things on your plate and you still need to get them all finished. So it's really important for you to be able to self-control and self-manage, self-plan. Leadership, again, coaching, because nobody wants to work for a loser and nobody's going to work for a loser. So you need to make sure that you are a guiding light, in a sense, for everyone in your organization and for your department. You're the go-to person. You're the person who solves the problem. And therefore, you have a team of people that you can implement to get it done. Critical thinking is one of the most desirable skills right now besides communications. Your ability to see outside the box and to explore things. This is actually a very interesting skill. I'm going to tell you why it's important. Every time I've been in contact with other businesses, especially, and I'm going back to the Board of Trade again, having sat on the committees and also sat on the chair positions there, one of the things I can tell you is we really, really love when somebody comes up with ideas. Most people will sit there like a vegetable sitting on a chair, and yet we really admire the people who think out of the box. They don't care what they say, they're just going to give you an idea and then they run with it. So it's kind of important to have that critical thinking skill where you're not afraid to bring your ideas forward. Sometimes people just keep thinking of different things, and then when they get an opportunity, they're the first person that speaks out. And you can't put them down. You have to really listen, because what's interesting is they become very creative in their approaches. But you have to get over the hurdle that other people may not believe in what you're saying, or may not like what you have to say, or they may not see the rationality within what you're presenting. So you need to be able to speak up and be able to think from different angles and look at issues from different angles. Be prepared to stand up for yourself and your ideas. And of course, the professionalism is always important. Making sure that you are always in control of yourself, your own nature, and you don't lose control. Professional managers will always walk away from an argument. They won't stick around, and then they'll come back with a solution. It's an important feature that you don't want to be seen as a problem. You want to be seen as a solution. And the professionalism is somebody who can look beyond the argument and actually see where the results are. So the good news is that's the end of this chapter. there's a lot of material there, and we've only just begun. There's still quite a bit of territory, and we're going to be breaking it down piece by piece as we go along. So I'm just going to share the PowerPoints with you as well. There they are. In a moment. There you go. Fantastic. So I've shared with you a few different documents here. PowerPoints I just put in there for you in the chat. But there are 3 documents here. 2 of them are something that you want to take a look at. One of them is the handouts. I'm just wondering if I have the other thing here as well. Give me one quick second. I might have something else that I can use. Textbook. Nope. No. Okay. So anyhow, one of the documents in here is actually the Shamrock organization we talked about, which is the breakdown into those elements for a manager's functions. The other one here is the handout number 2. And the first one is the blanks for this particular chapter. So just opening that up. There we go. So chapter number 1, and these are the ones that you can fill out, will help you a great deal with the quizzes. And it's also going to help you a great deal when it comes to, let's say, doing the final test. In case you don't get that book very quickly, hopefully they'll send that out today. And I've been asking them for myself as well because I don't see it. And they're going to have to put them in for all of us. So hopefully they'll get the books in for us. This is some of the details I'd like you to work on. So once again, do this particular area. I'm back. Fantastic. Okay. I click on everything. I don't know what'll happen next. Super stuff. Okay, guys, so I'm going to let you go. I want you to work on that stuff. Read chapter number 1. Kutesa, we're going to try to get you that book as quickly as possible as well. So keep an eye on your emails because it'll come in that form. Have a great day, guys.
Have a great day.